Welcome to Deloitte's Debrief Tax webcast series in Asia Pacific. Our webcast today is from our Global Mobility, Talent and Reward series and is titled Looking Ahead, Key Trends on Tax and Immigration Impacting Talent Mobility in Asia Pacific. My name is Sandip Bandel, and I am an Immigration Director based in our Deloitte Singapore office. I have the pleasure of hosting today's webcast. I have two speakers with me today, Rebecca Lai and Helen Ha. Rebecca is a partner based in our Deloitte China Hong Kong office, and Helen is also a partner based in our Deloitte Suzhou office. You may access our bios on the left of the screen. Before I introduce the agenda for today's webcast, I'd like to take a moment to highlight some of the features of our webcast console. First, all users are on listen-only mode. If you have any content-related questions, you can submit at any time in the Q&A box right at the bottom of the screen, and we will do our best to respond to your questions during the presentation. Second, if you are a PC user, you can maximize or minimize each box at your convenience during the webcast. You may also explore the icons at the bottom of the screen. And if you want to download today's slides and related publications, you may do so by accessing the Downloads and Links box. For any mobile device users, you can view the slides and answer the survey on screen. And thirdly, if you require an attendance record for this event, you can download your CPE certificate by clicking the Request CPE icon at the bottom of the webcast console. So now let me give you an overview of the topics we will discuss today. So we will be going through some updates on talent incentives in China, then looking at latest trends and market insights on benefits in kind tax legislative change. We will look at Asia Pacific individual income tax updates. I will be providing some updates on Asia Pacific immigration, and we will then finish with a discussion on global mobility insights on COVID-19 before taking some questions at the end of the session. So that brings us to the first polling question of the day, and the question is, what type of policy support can local government consider in order to attract and retain high-end talent and urgently needed talent? You do have the option of choosing more than one answer. The options are financial support, tax incentives, immigration support, housing support, children's education support, and if you don't know, if you think it's not applicable, please feel free to click on that. And whilst we are waiting for the results to come in, Helen, maybe I can start with you. What do you think are the key considerations of your clients in talent attraction and retention?
Sure, Sandy. Good afternoon, everyone. Based on my observation, personal tax is one of the most important considerations, particularly in attracting overseas talent, because personal tax regime varies by countries or regions. So when overseas talents choose offers, I believe their first instinct is to calculate the personal tax to get net take-home pay. It is natural that companies also take personal tax into consideration when they do the talent recruitment or retention budgeting. Apart from personal tax element, there are also other key considerations. Generally, talents come with families and they will need various supports such as kids' education, housing rental, and etc. So I believe there is a lot of considerations in retaining and attracting talent. It is indeed a comprehensive project. Back to you, Sandeep.
Thanks, Helen, and I think the majority of our listeners also agree with you. The majority, 76.8% in fact, have also chosen tax incentives. So with that, I will now hand over to Rebecca to provide some updates on talent incentives in China.
Thank you, Sandy. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Now, let me start with individual income tax subsidy in the Greater Bay Area, GBA. GBA actually refers to 9 mainland China cities, Hong Kong, and Macau. The 9 mainland China cities are Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Zhuhai, Foshan, Huizhou, Dongguan, Zhongshan, Xiamen, and Shaoxing. The local governments of the 9 mainland cities have collectively offered personal tax subsidy to the amount of tax about 15%, which would treat the person as if he or she worked in Hong Kong. So we call it GBA-IIT subsidy. The subsidy offered is not taxable in China and is effective from January 2019 to December 2023. The subsidy is available to foreign individuals who are high-end talents or urgently need talent working in the GBA mainland China cities. Each city has announced its rules about the regulations. We have summarized the common details relating to the various eligibility and qualification, while please refer to the local rules for the different standards. In brief, for foreigners, usually those holding a Category A work permit are eligible as high-end talent, and if not, they may still be qualified as urgently need talent. Another remark you may want to notice is the person needs to be working in the city for at least 90 days in a calendar year, except Dongguan, Zhongshan, and Foshan. The subsidy refers to the amount of tax over 15% of the annual taxable income, calculated under the PLC Individual Income Tax, IIT, regulations. And the taxable income would include comprehensive income, which consists of salary or wages, royalties, service income, and author's remuneration, business operation income, and other income by working in government projects. To give you an idea of the amount of subsidy for the various levels of taxable income, you may refer to the lower right hand for various examples. You may have noticed that the higher the comprehensive income, the higher percentage of tax saving, given China adopts the progressive rate from 3% to 45% on the taxable comprehensive income. So in the case of 3 million RMB, the tax saving is 61%. It is indeed a very big subsidy to the qualified talent. Starting from 2020, those who would apply in Shenzhen can use the Hong Kong tax calculator under Hong Kong salary tax rules to compare the IIT paid in China. So, if you are not subject to the 15% tax rate in Hong Kong, the amount of subsidy you receive will be even more. However, the calculation method under this situation would be more complicated and would require knowledge of Hong Kong salary tax rules. The application of the subsidy is done once a year after the completion of the annual reconciliation filing at the end of June. So the 2019 application was completed already around August, September 2020, and a lot of the successful applicants have already received the subsidy from the authority. For year 2020, it will be applied in the middle of 2021, so please follow the local rules of each city accordingly. We conducted a pulse survey in January and collected 87 responses on various questions in relation to the GBA subsidy. In particular, how the subsidy impacts the talent mobility to the GBA mainland cities. Let me share with you some of the findings. 45% of the respondents have applied for the subsidy, and majority of those have less than 5 applicants. 85% of those applied were successful. 55% of the respondents have not applied, and when asking them why, 25% of which were not aware of the subsidy. These were the feedback of the first year application, so it is not surprising that some respondents may have taken an observation approach, that is, let's see what really happened first. While although the subsidy has been a hot topic for Southern China region, those outside of Southern China region might not consider this subsidy seriously, or they were even not aware of it. We also asked the respondents whether they found the subsidy an incentive for them to relocate talent to work in the GBA mainland cities. 62% of the respondents said so, as they found the subsidy an incentive for them to relocate talent to work in GBA. And when asking what are the top 3 concerns over the policy, the top one is the sustainability and continuity of the policy. The second one is the number of employees eligible for the subsidy. And the third one is the application approval rate. These are valid concerns. If the policy is sustainable and will continue, this will facilitate the long-term planning of various businesses to expand in the GBA mainland cities, as attracting talent to the southern China region may become easier because of the lower personal tax burden. And to the talent, the prospect of working in the GBA mainland cities is also more promising. With this, if asking the future prospects of the incentive, 83% agreed that they will proactively assist eligible employees to apply the subsidy. When asking the reasons, 56% consider it provides little savings to the eligible employees. 46% consider this is a cost saving to the companies, since all or a portion of the savings goes back to the company. 39% consider this as highly effective talent retention and attraction policy. When looking at the subsidy allocation, the result is quite even. Part of the subsidy returns back to the company or individual, or split among the company and the individual. These results are within our expectation, as with the proximity between Hong Kong and the mainland GBA cities, individuals may find it attractive to work and live in the GBA cities, and being taxed as if they work in Hong Kong is an added advantage. On the other hand, we have not seen any incentive before in such scale in China, being officially announced and coherent in the implementation. So I would say the GBA IIT subsidy is one of the kind. Apart from the GBA IIT subsidy, Hainan government has also announced similar incentives with effect from 2020. The standards and conditions are very similar to those of GBA. It also provides a similar 15% effective tax rate for qualified talent working in Hainan. But the Hainan policy is not limited to overseas talent. Chinese nationals will also qualify. In addition, the program is going to extend beyond 2025 for another 10 years, when the progressive tax rate would then be 3%, 10%, and 15%, versus the existing 3% to 45% on comprehensive income. So the applicability is implemented on a wider basis. We would like to give you a comparison between the GBA and the Hainan incentives item by item. In the interest of time, we will not go through each item, but would like to highlight the differences for your attention. Firstly, you may see on the last item about opposed to enjoy the benefits. For getting the Hainan incentive, there is no separate application as it can be done through the annual reconciliation filing. As mentioned earlier, the deadline for completing the annual reconciliation filing is end of June each year. Hence, tax residents can perform annual reconciliation filing to enjoy the incentive, while for non-residents, per the latest announcement, they can apply the incentive directly with the in-charge tax bureau of their tax withholding agent in Hainan. On the other hand, regarding the working day requirement, the current rule in Hainan does not mention the number of days in Hainan, but in 2025 and years after, it is 183 days. For the effective period, it has been said the Hainan incentive will extend beyond 2024 for another 10 years. But so far, no further extension is announced by the GBA mainland city government. We expect that the situation is evolving, so there may be more or different arrangements for attracting talent to the region based on the local government needs and other positive initiatives. Now, let me pass to Helen to talk about the incentives in other cities in China.
Thank you, Rebecca. The incentives in southern region of China are very attractive. Companies located in the eastern China may wonder if any incentives in my region. Yes, Shanghai and the Suzhou city of Jiangsu province also offer comprehensive incentives not only addressing taxes, but also covering other aspects of life, such as immigration, household registration, and etc. Local government is helping talents settle more easily. First, let's look at what are offered in Shanghai Pilot Free Trade Zone, the Lingang area. I will briefly go through the incentives. Lingang plans to offer personal income tax incentives for overseas talents by reference to the GBA. Tax subsidies may be offered to qualified high-end and urgently needed foreign talents in qualified industries. Currently, the detailed implementation rules are yet to be officially announced. The local government also issues measures to simplify immigration procedures for foreign talents, such as age restriction relief, longer work permit granted, and green channels. Local talents do not need to go through immigration procedure, but they do have needs such as Shanghai Hukou and higher scoring of residence permit. According to latest policy, qualified local talents may enjoy special policy on Shanghai Hukou application and the residence permit scoring. Lastly, the new area also welcomes professionals in finance, architecture, and etc. Qualified professionals can practice their professions in China after registration with their overseas practice experience counted in. As you may see from my introduction, local government is trying their best to attract and retain talent. Companies and individuals may pay close attention to the latest policy update, assess the eligibility, understand the procedure to enjoy policies, and take actions timely. In case where the application is complicated, companies and individuals may seek professional support where needed. Now let's look at the policies of another popular city in eastern China, i.e. Suzhou City of Jiangsu Province. As you may see from the slide, Suzhou offers various subsidies to talents and also provides resourceful support for innovation businesses. The incentives are not limited within tax and financial support, but also provide support in talent livelihood, such as kids' education, social care, health care, and etc. The goal is to help talents live better after settling down. We summarize the 7 key measures here. From efficiency's sake, I will not go through the list one by one. Companies and individuals may refer to the list and leverage professional policies in time. From our introduction, you may be surprised to find that there are indeed various local incentives across China. We would recommend that companies actively learn local policies and apply for qualified professional policies. In complicated cases, you may seek professional support. On top of the incentive tax policies, I know that companies and foreign employees are keen to understand the market trends of well-known professional tax policies, the non-taxable benefits in kind policy. We call it non-taxable BIK policy in short. In the next section, I will share with you the latest trends and market insights. Currently, non-taxable BIK policy is widely used by most companies for talent strategy and additional compensation. It aims to attract and maintain foreign employees as it offsets some of higher living costs of working and raising a family in China. The benefits include the cost of housing rental, kids' education, language training, homely travel, meal and laundry, and relocation. During the 2019 RIT reform, there was a lot of discussion whether the non-taxable BIK policy should be cancelled, and finally, a grace period is offered. where housing rental, kids education, language training are continued to be offered from 2019 to 2021. Given the above, if there is no further extension offered, technically, from the 1st of January 2022, foreigners can no longer enjoy BIK items for housing, language training, and kids education. Instead, foreigners could enjoy the additional itemized deduction AID as regulated, such as housing, mortgage, interest, or rental, kids education expenses, continuing education expenses, and etc. It's unclear whether other non-taxable BIKs such as home leave, meal and laundry, and relocation are still valid for foreign employees in China. These can be further offered if the ruling relation to these are not cancelled. Although the rules are not clear at this stage, companies need to get prepared in advance. If BIK for housing, education, and language training are cancelled, definitely the new regulation would increase the tax cost for foreign employees who borne the tax by themselves, or increase the tax cost for the company if the foreign employee is tax equalized to home country tax. It is likely such a change may not only impact foreign MNCs in China, but also China domestic companies who have high-end foreign talent. As the end of 3-year grace period is approaching, more and more companies are starting to pay special attention on this matter. Many companies are reviewing the implications to the company and its foreign employees, and is working on the backup plan and the communication strategy in order to tackle with the uncertainty and the potential implications as a result of legislative change. At this moment, in spite of the uncertainties, it is recommended that companies should analyze the implications to different groups of foreign employees and review the analysis with senior management and key stakeholders. Based on the deep dive of implications to different groups of foreign employees, it will enable each person to engage key stakeholders and get senior leadership on board. Then the company should keep close eye on the latest development and market best practice on how other companies, especially peers companies in the same industry, are dealing with the change. In the meantime, the company should work out different backup plans for different groups of foreign employees under different scenarios. Since the HR had already well prepared for the potential change and work out the backup plan and the communication strategy, it will help the company to make a smooth transition on the policy change once the new regulation is announced. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you, Helen. Now, let us look at some tax incentive policy in the APEC region. In the interest of time, we'll cover a few of them, and if there is any specific country that you are interested in or you would require further details, please feel free to contact us. From the top, we have Japan. In Japan, there is a proposal whereby foreigners who live in Japan for over 10 years, their overseas assets will be exempted from inheritance tax. The other proposal is for unlisted funds, including investment funds. Executive remuneration may be treated as business expenses to help reduce corporate tax. As these are only at the proposal stage, nothing has been finalized yet, so please monitor the development. Now, let's look at Hong Kong. For Hong Kong, subject to the legislative procedures, eligible carried interest shall be charged at 0% under Hong Kong profit tax and fully exclude from employment income for the purpose of Hong Kong salary tax. Once the bill is passed, the tax exemption shall apply retrospectively to eligible carried interest received or accrued on or after April 1st, 2020. this incentive is indeed a great news to the private equity industry. In addition, various reliefs have been announced in the 2021 and 22 budgets recently, including reducing salary tax and tax under personal assessment by 100%, subject to a ceiling of 10,000 Hong Kong dollars, issuing electronic consumption vouchers in installments with a total value of 5,000 Hong Kong dollars to each eligible Hong Kong permanent resident and new arrival aged 18 or above. Then let's look at Malaysia. To further encourage skilled Malaysian citizens working abroad to return and work in Malaysia, it is proposed that the application period for the Returning Express Program incentive be extended for another 3 years with slight changes made. On the other hand, the Malaysian government had announced a tax holiday of up to 15 years for manufacturing companies that relocate their operation to Malaysia. To further enhance this incentive, it is proposed that up to 5 non-citizen individuals who hold key or C-suite position in the company that has been granted the relocation tax incentive will be taxed at a flat rate of 15% for 5 consecutive years. For Singapore, due to COVID-19, individuals may be strained in Singapore. Per the announcement, individuals' employment income will not be taxable in Singapore from the date of return to Singapore through either the date of departure from Singapore or March 31st, 2021, whichever is earlier, when certain conditions are met. Next, let's look at Indonesia. Certain tax reforms and incentives were introduced as part of the Omnibus Law with the intention to attract investments and boost the economy. One of the main tax reforms is the introduction of the territorial basis of taxation for certain individual taxpayers. Prior to the enactment of the Omnibus Law, all tax resident individuals, including foreigners, were subject to Indonesian tax on their worldwide income. Under the Omnibus Law, foreign individuals who are Indonesian tax residents will only be taxed on their Indonesia source income for up to 4 years after they become a tax resident of Indonesia, provided that they hold certain skills and fulfill eligibility criteria. Lastly, we have Australia. There is an acceleration of the personal tax cuts, and on the other hand, there are fringe benefit tax measures which provide welcome relief for employers, particularly in relation to the proposed car parking exemption for businesses with a turnover of less than 50 million. Additionally, the reduced administration requirements around employee declarations and using existing documentation are also a welcome relief for employers. The above is what I wanted to share with you for the APAC region, and as you may see, some incentives are implemented to boost the economy. So then, would these incentives attract talents or drive talent mobility into or within the region? Given the diversity among the different countries in APAC region, we will monitor the developments and will be happy to share our insights in the soon future. Let me hand over now to Sandy to talk about the APAC immigration update. Sandy, over to you.
Thanks, Rebecca. So allow me to take you through the immigration updates for the Asia-Pacific region. I don't think it would be possible to talk about the immigration changes in the region without talking about what we've observed from a COVID-19 standpoint, since there's been such a strong impact to immigration. The APAC region was the first to react to the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of border closures, and our borders have now been closed for a year. So this has really created a hugely complex environment for global organizations with a mobile workforce. The challenges that have been encountered by employers and employees can be broadly broken down into the 4 categories as per the slide on the screen right now. The first being changes to government rules and processes. And we've seen the majority of jurisdictions in this region bringing changes in relation to quarantine requirements and COVID-19 testing requirements, as well as the closures to borders themselves. So immigration offices have had to close at very short notice, and there's also been a huge cost implication. That's often been the cost of these new requirements coming in, having to be borne by the employer. All of these changes have resulted in a hugely complex environment for employers, as companies have often had to look at alternative hiring strategies and not necessarily basing it on the best candidate for the role, but having to look more broadly at whether the candidate could be brought in and mobilized by a particular time that they're required for that role. For the first time, we've seen countries introducing restrictions on their own citizens from leaving a country, such as what we've seen in Australia and Malaysia. So employers have been faced with having to balance the new requirements in place for host locations, as well as having to look at the issue of employees having to satisfy newly introduced exit requirements from their home locations also. Managing immigration programs has never been an easy task, but the pandemic on a global scale has made this even more challenging for employers, especially as different jurisdictions have not all responded in the same manner. There is a real need for flexibility, and we've seen that over the last 12 months, and we will continue to see that moving forward. But this isn't just on the part of employers and employees wanting to travel, but also on the part of immigration authorities. This region has often been seen as quite traditional and even somewhat archaic, with requirements around original signatures and stamps being required for work permit and work visa applications. Sometimes there's the need for an applicant's physical presence for the submission of an application. But I would say one of the positives to come out of the pandemic is more governments moving towards a digital execution of documents and also more electronic application platforms. In terms of business travel, the vast majority of jurisdictions in this region have put a hold on visa-free entry programs, and they've also limited the number of categories that individuals are able to use to enter a country. Whilst we're seeing a number of jurisdictions in this region reacting to the economic downturns in their countries by ramping up the minimum requirements for an applicant to apply for a work permit, whether that's in relation to qualifications or salary requirements, we're also seeing countries continuing in their quest to keep the economy moving by introducing immigration incentives to allow employers to keep on hiring foreign nationals into these countries, or for individual foreigners themselves to be able to apply for immigration status in their own right. So starting with China, and I will do a deeper dive into China on the very recently announced updates. But on a high level, China was the first to be impacted by the virus, and we're seeing a recognition to keep the economy moving. So processing types for the Type A work permit, which Rebecca mentioned is for top talent, has been shortened, so companies are able to have a more realistic time frame as to when they can get their foreign employees to be able to take on their roles. In addition, there's also been a number of new incentives that have been introduced for Shanghai, and we will be looking into that a little bit further. Moving on to Singapore. Singapore has implemented a number of immigration changes in the last 12 months, most notably raising the minimum salary requirements and also increasing the resident labour market testing requirements. But Singapore wants to focus on key industry types to continue to help the economy to grow. So recently, the Tech Pass, which builds on a similar pass that was introduced a couple of years ago, has been introduced to allow tech entrepreneurs or leaders or technical experts from around the world to come to Singapore to perform frontier and disruptive innovations. Then looking at Japan, Japan passed an immigration bill back in 2018 to allow mid-skilled workers accelerated access to work visas. Japan is also open to allowing more entrepreneurs to come into the country to set up business. And even though it's in a state of emergency right now, once the state of emergency lifts, we do expect Japan to continue building the foreigner worker headcount. Looking at Republic of China, Taiwan. Taiwan has recognized the need for different types of work permits, so different industries are able to sponsor foreigners with the most appropriate work permit type. And I do want to call out on the introduction of the Employment Gold Card, which was introduced a few years ago, and it allows a substantial amount of flexibility to an individual who wants to live and work in Taiwan, as they don't require a company sponsor and can be accompanied by close family members, including parents and grandparents, and there are also tax incentives that are provided. We've seen that the Employment Gold Card has continued to gain traction throughout the pandemic. So now moving on to look at China in more depth. There have been a number of travel updates from early 2020, and we'll go through some of the key dates in relation to the changes. So going right back to 28th of March last year, because of the rapid spread of COVID-19 across the world at that time, China decided to temporarily suspend entry into China by foreign nationals who were already holding visas or residence permits that were still valid at the time of the announcement. And this was a real impactful change because it included all visa holders, including APAC business travel card holders. China did, however, continue to allow entry to those holding diplomatic service or courtesy or C visas, but for any foreign nationals coming into China for economic, trade, scientific or technological activities, or out of the need because of humanitarian emergency reasons, they were required to apply for new visas at the local Chinese embassies or consulates where the individual was based. So after March last year, broadly speaking, any foreign nationals that require, all foreign nationals were required to apply for a new visa and really had to show strong justification as to why they needed to enter China. And then moving on sort of 6 months later, China announced effective 28th of September last year, foreign nationals holding valid Chinese residence permits for work, personal matters and reunion would be allowed to enter China without the need to apply for new visas. And if immigration authorities allowed a concession for those holding residence permits that had expired after 28th of March last year, and they were allowed to apply for relevant visas by presenting the expired residence permit and relevant materials to the Chinese embassies on the condition that the purpose of the holder's travel had not changed. So all of those travelling would strictly have to abide by the Chinese regulations on epidemic prevention and control. However, what we saw in November 2020 was a change again, and this was really resulting from the global COVID-19 situation that China decided to temporarily suspend entry by foreign nationals from more specific geographies this time. And Chinese embassies and consulates in those relevant jurisdictions stopped issuing certified health declarations for those travellers. So the affected countries currently are Bangladesh, Belgium, Ethiopia, France, India, Italy, Philippines, Russia, United Kingdom, Ukraine and Canada. Entry by diplomatic service and courtesy visa holders is not affected, so foreign nationals visiting China for emergency needs do need to apply for visas at the Chinese embassy or consulate where they are located. So looking at the regulations more broadly, in 2020, the China local authority optimized many immigration applications in the country, and one of them was the applications around the notification letter, as well as work permits and work permit cancellations, and these were now allowed to be submitted online, and the original package was no longer required for on-site submission. Also, the approval period was shortened to 2 business days. And then touching on the PU letter, since March last year, China has decided to temporarily suspend the entry into China by foreign nationals. However, those wanting to enter for economic or trade or scientific or technological activities, they need to apply for visas. And in order to apply for the new visa at the Chinese embassy or the consulate, the foreign national needs to file the Chinese visa after obtaining a proper PU letter. And the PU letter is issued by the city or the province where the Foreign Affairs Office is located, and it needs to have a local entity in mainland China to sponsor the PU letter application. The employer or third-party vendor who has a business relationship can file the application for the assignee, and it needs to show strong justification for the travel. Usually the application will request the applicant to provide the strong business reasons as to why they physically need to be in China and they're not able to do that role remotely. Before traveling to China, the applicant needs to take the nucleic acid test and upload the report to obtain the green health code within 48 hours of travel. And once they arrive in China, the application needs to serve a period of quarantine. For most cities, that's 14 days. However, some cities may request for a further 7 or 14 days of quarantine. As we mentioned earlier, in China, foreign workers are generally categorized into 3 groups. So Category A is for top talent, Category B is for professional talent, and Category C is defined as other workers. So some examples are foreign interns or graduates. But officials in Shanghai have now expanded Category A, so that besides global entrepreneurs and leading scientists, it also includes foreign scientific or technological researchers and PhD holders in science and engineering, agriculture and medicine. Anybody who qualifies for this category can apply for an R visa, which is valid for up to 10 years, and accompanying family members can also apply for R visas within the same period. So this really demonstrates China's commitment to staying dynamic and continuing to build key industries that will help with economic growth. So now moving on and looking more broadly in terms of what we expect to see in terms of immigration changes this year and beyond. Firstly, the emergence of more travel bubbles. There's one between Singapore and China. And as countries stabilize the number of COVID-19 cases and the vaccine is rolled out to more residents, we do expect to see more countries bilaterally agreeing on travel arrangements. Also expect to see more changes to existing immigration policies and programs, especially with the economic downturn in this region. Governments are likely to introduce changes such as enhancing the requirements around resident labour market testing, as well as governments introducing more strategies at targeting key industries that they want to enable to grow further. A positive that I mentioned was more digitalization of immigration portals and systems, so we expect to see more of that across Asia especially. So now moving on more to look at global mobility insights on COVID-19. Helen, maybe I can start with you. What are your observations on compliance and regulatory under COVID-19?
Thanks, Sandy. Due to COVID-19, we do see some clients are faced with challenges in China tax compliance in the past year because of travel restrictions. Some foreigners may be detained overseas and can only perform China duties remotely from home country. Under current tax ruling, foreigners' tax residence are determined by their physical presence in China. Generally, if they stay 183 days or more during the calendar, they will be considered as tax residents. Otherwise, they will be non-residents. Therefore, in practice, some foreigners who were assessed as tax residents at year beginning turn out to be non-residents at year end. Accordingly, they should perform an amendment filing to change from tax resident to non-resident. This is a potential requirement arising in the context of COVID-19. Companies may need to closely monitor the physical status of foreign employees and take action in time. Another issue we encounter in practice is double taxation. Some overseas countries may consider income attributed to physical days in their territory as their local source income and impose local personal tax. However, from China tax perspective, If local companies still pay the remuneration for foreigners work remotely, the income is also considered as China source income and taxable in China. This will lead to double taxation. Under such special scenario, China team and overseas teams should work together to analyze local tax implications and discuss with local tax authorities to see if any viable way to avoid the double taxation. Based on our experience, the communication can be quite complicated, and the local tax authorities assess case by case. We recommend the clients to seek professional support where necessary. Back to you, Sandy.
Thanks, Ellen. And Rebecca, from a remote work perspective, what have you seen?
Sure. I would say it is no doubt that COVID-19 is a real acceleration for a lot of employers to ask the fundamental question, where the work needs to happen. COVID-19 is showing us that actually where we believe the work needs to happen or where the employees are isn't necessarily true. We have seen that the workplace can now be geographically dispersed. We may say that not all employees who can work remote tend to appreciate the freedom of choice. However, it can be assumed that future talent would expect to be allowed to have such choice. We also see that the attitudes of remote working have shifted dramatically during COVID, and employees are now actually setting expectations for flexible work conditions as a factor choosing the right job. And for the employer side, there are some clear opportunities linked to remote working, such as less office space and less cost. And also, in the event of remote work, the talent pool can be more or less global without the hurdles that we typically come across in international deployments. However, employers must then need to manage a complex environment as the work is performed outside the normal tax jurisdiction, which can include not only employee tax compliance risks, but also corporate permanent establishment exposure, unexpected costs if not managed properly. These are some of the risk areas that we can identify quite easily. So having a remote work or flexible work policy will be essential to attract or retain talent. And whether a virtual assignment policy should be in place on top of the typical long or short-term assignment policy or business travelers policies, and how all these policies adjust issues from compliance to reward offerings, etc., will be essential, and companies should act quickly if not already done so. Back to you, Sandy.
Thanks, Rebecca. And picking up a point that you just mentioned there, from an immigration perspective, I think policies are very important. When the pandemic hit, an immigration policy wasn't something that a company necessarily had. Often companies had relocation policies or tax policies, but not an immigration policy. Or if they did have an immigration policy in place, with the pandemic, it was found that it may not actually be fit for purpose anymore. So companies should really look at having an immigration policy in place, and we've certainly seen a lot of our clients ramping up their efforts in this area, really to take into account the potential risks and challenges with cross-border travel, and also bringing in elements, very new elements around quarantine and COVID-19 testing requirements, and also whether authorizations are required for short-term travel, making sure that this really aligns with other policies such as the company's remote work or tax policies. So this actually brings us to the second polling question of the day. And the question is, does your company have a remote working policy? So this is a single choice, and the options are no, and we don't have a plan to set up a remote work policy yet. No, but we have a plan to set up a remote work policy. Yes, we have a remote work policy, but it is temporary as a result of COVID-19. Or yes, we have an ongoing and permanent remote work policy. Or you may not know, or it may not be applicable. So please do go ahead and make your choices. And while we're waiting for the results to come in, let me ask Rebecca. Rebecca, we've seen a remote work practice survey that was done in the US. Maybe you want to just talk through the results with us?
Sure, Sandy. In January 2021, the Remote Work Practices Survey was published, which was done by Insights International LLC and Deloitte Consulting LLP. They gathered the response of 202 companies from various industries to understand their remote work practice and policies. Firstly, 93% of the U.S. companies have a remote work policy, of which 58% said the remote work policies are temporary as a result of COVID-19, while 42% of companies have an ongoing and permanent remote work policy. Furthermore, a majority of companies utilize geographic differentials to adjust salary for individuals who work remotely, through very few companies actively check the location of their remote workforce. From the survey about the impact of COVID-19 on remote work policies, 71% changed workforce eligibility criteria in response to COVID-19. 48% don't know what their remote work policy will look like after the pandemic. 29% are considering making their current temporary remote work policy permanent. Another finding is that only 31% of companies have reimbursed remote workers for home office equipment. I would say it's good to know what companies in other regions are doing or being impacted. So if you are interested to know more about the survey results, please feel free to contact us. Back to you, Sandeep.
Thanks, Rebecca. And the survey results are in. Interestingly, the majority have chosen, yes, we have a remote work policy, but it's temporary and as a result of COVID-19. So thank you to everybody who took part in that poll. So this actually brings us to the end of today's discussion, and we have some time now to respond to some of the questions that have come in from the audience. And thank you very much to everybody who has sent a question through. Rebecca, maybe you can take this question. It's around the Hainan incentive. It says, is it possible to set up a new company in Hainan, put the headcount of senior executives in Hainan, and file tax returns in Hainan so that these executives can enjoy a preferential tax rate of 15%?
Sure. Well, I would say, according to the relevant regulations, high-end talent and urgently needed talent who enjoy the policy must work in the Hainan Free Trade Port and pay social insurance contribution like basic pension insurance for more than 6 months in a tax year, and must be bound by job contracts or employment arrangement for more than 1 year with enterprises or entities registered and substantially operating in the Hainan Free Trade Port. So based on this regulation and our experience, the Hainan Audit Department may conduct a rigorous review of whether the enterprise has substantive business operations in Hainan. If not, the employees may not be eligible for the subsidy. So we recommend paying special attention to meet the requirement for substantive business operations. For example, whether the company has a reasonable business development plan and arrangement, whether the employees dispatched to Hainan are in line with the company's development plan, is there adequate number of full-time employees or other personnel with appropriate qualifications that is reasonable staffing of the company, whether the actual business volume and its contribution to Hainan's economy match with the personnel salary cost, the subsidies enjoyed, etc. And is the Hainan company maintaining adequate operating conditions, including having business permits or plants, assets, and equipment? That's all from my side. Back to you, Sandy.
Thank you so much for that, Rebecca. There's another question around non-taxable BIKs. Maybe Helen, I can ask you to take this one. It says, you mentioned the non-taxable BIK is likely to be cancelled by the end of this year. Based on your observation, how do your clients get prepared for this potential policy change? Helen, can I ask you to take this one?
Yes. Recently, actually, this is a very hot topic among clients in the market. In client meetings, I'm always asked the same question. Is it for sure that the BIK policy will be abolished in January 2022? We may not get a definite answer soon. What we get to do now is to get prepared for uncertainty changes. As the potential change will have significant impact on the tax costs for companies with considerable number of foreign employees, we see that more and more clients already start to design Plan B. It is a comprehensive project including cost projection, market benchmarking, policy adjustment, implementation plan, and etc. Companies may take some time to have everything ready and all parties aligned. Based on my experience, clients prefer to engage professional support during the process because this is a quite sensitive project. A third-party professional advice is neutral, persuasive, and close to the market practice. In recent months, we are constantly approached by different clients to address the potential changes, help them to make a smooth transition plan. For example, we assist clients to analyze the different cost impact for different scenario foreign employees after the elimination of the policy. We conduct benchmarking with peers companies and share the market insights with our clients. We also assist clients to construct policy for different groups of foreign employees. In short, with our assistance, we hope that clients can successfully solve the impact of policy changes. Send it over to you.
Thank you so much for that, Helen. And we do have an immigration question that's come in, and maybe I can take that one. It's around the vaccine and whether we know anything around governments requiring a vaccine passport to allow travel. That's a great question and highly topical right now. The good news for this region is that the majority of countries have received a vaccine and are starting to roll it out to residents. It hasn't been made mandatory in this region by any government except for Indonesia. And we do know that airlines such as Singapore Airlines and New Zealand Air are exploring the idea of a vaccine passport, and Singapore Airlines has just announced that they will be piloting this on a flight from Singapore to London to start with. But we do expect to hear more around this from the second half of this year. So I would say stay tuned on that. So that is unfortunately all we have time for today. Rebecca and Helen, a big thank you to the two of you, and a special thanks to all of you who were able to join us. We would like to encourage you to fill out the short survey that will be popping up on your screen momentarily and tell us what you think about today's program. If you happen to join us late, the presentation will be archived for future viewing. So if you feel that others would benefit from this webcast, you are able to share the webcast via the Share This icon or have them visit the Debriefs website. We will be responding to all the other questions that we were not able to respond to during this session over the course of the next week or two. Also, if you have any other questions or comments later, please do feel free to reach out to either me or our speakers, and we would be more than happy to talk to you. And please don't forget to tune in to our next scheduled webcast from the Corporate Income Tax Series on 16th of March, which is titled Tax Controversy in Asia Pacific, Implications and Takeaways, and that's part of a series. So at last, from all of us at Deloitte, thank you for your participation in Deloitte's Asia Pacific Tax webcast today. Goodbye.